Imagine this. You wake up in a room that doesn't belong to you. There's a camera watching from the corner, a table in front of you, and a single envelope with your name on it. Inside, a simple message: you owe 100 million yen. Your only way out is to lie. No instructions, no rules, just that. Now imagine your best friend walks through the door. They're holding the same envelope. Their eyes scan you, searching for honesty or betrayal. You both smile, awkward, polite, but behind your face, something dark uncoils. You're not sure if you trust them. You're not sure if you should. And worst of all, you're not sure if they trust you. This is not a game of luck. It's not about skill either. It's a game of trust, illusion, and calculated betrayal. The more honest you are, the faster you lose. The more you lie, the more you might win, unless the lie swallows you first. That's the world of liar game. But here's the real kicker. You're not playing to win. You're playing to not lose. To not be humiliated. To not be indebted. To not be exposed. The pressure is not to rise above, but to avoid being the last to fall. And in that desperation, something terrifying awakens your capacity to deceive, not out of cruelty, not out of power hunger, out of survival. What if the only way to stay good is to lie? What if telling the truth guarantees your destruction? What if trust is a luxury only the naive can afford? The rules of the liar game are cruel because they're honest. Unlike the real world, where manipulation hides behind polite smiles and socially acceptable lies, this game puts every mask under a spotlight. It doesn't create liars. It reveals the ones already there. Because when you're cornered with nothing but your dignity and fear, you learn quickly. People don't lie because they're evil. They lie because they're afraid. Fear of being betrayed. Fear of being the fool. Fear of being the only one who plays fair in a rigged system. And in that moment, what do you choose? Do you lie first to protect yourself, or do you stay honest and risk being destroyed by someone else's lie? It's a test of your morality, your beliefs, your faith in other people. But here's the paradox. The more innocent you are, the more you'll suffer. The more corrupt you are, the more likely you are to thrive. And yet, it's not always the worst people who win, it's the ones who understand the game. So ask yourself, would you rather be a victim with integrity or a survivor with blood on your hands? You might think you'd never betray someone else, especially not a friend, but the liar game doesn't ask you to betray them. It forces you to watch them betray you first, and when they do, it's no longer betrayal. It's justice. It's retaliation. It's balance. You don't lie to hurt them. You lie to restore fairness. Because in a system that rewards dishonesty, honesty becomes a handicap. But here's the most disturbing part. This isn't just a fictional game. It's a mirror, a brutally accurate one. Because the real world has its own version of the liar game played in relationships, business, politics, even families. Not with envelopes and cash, but with expectations, guilt, social contracts, unspoken rules that everyone breaks but no one admits to. The liar game is just a concentrated version of life, stripped of pleasantries, raw, surgical. It exposes the machinery beneath your decisions, and it asks one chilling question. If everyone around you lies to survive, is it still wrong to lie back? Morality becomes flexible, identity becomes fluid, and your sense of right and wrong, once so clear, begins to blur. Maybe the real question is this: can you win the game without losing yourself? But what if the game is designed to make that impossible? What if every move you make chips away at who you are? And what if the only way to protect your soul is to stop believing you ever had one in the first place? This is where the rabbit hole begins. Not with a lie, but with a choice that feels like the lesser evil. And once you take that first step, it's hard to know which part of you is real anymore. The part that wants to believe in good, or the part that's learning how to manipulate it. So what do you do now when the lie feels more real than the truth? We need to go deeper. Because what if the true enemy isn't the liar across the table, but the part of you that still believes there's a way to play clean? Let's talk about that. Trust is beautiful when it's mutual, but when it's one-sided, it becomes a weapon. You're told from childhood that truth is good and lies are bad, that honesty leads to justice. That transparency breeds trust. But nobody tells you the darker half. Honesty is only safe in a world where everyone plays fair. In a world full of liars, telling the truth makes you a target. And that's the quiet horror of the liar game. It strips away the illusion that good people always win. It replaces it with something colder, more primal. Good people hesitate. They think. They weigh consequences. They want to believe in others. But liars strike. First, hard, and without guilt. Because they've already rewritten the story in their heads to justify what they're doing. But why does this happen? Why is it so easy to fall into manipulation when we were raised to believe in virtue? It begins with fear. Not the loud kind. The quiet, everyday kind. The fear of rejection. The fear of being made a fool. The fear that you'll give someone your trust, and they'll use it like a knife. Carl Jung once said, "The reason for evil in the world is that people are not able to tell their stories." And what he meant wasn't just confession, he meant confrontation. With the parts of ourselves we bury, the liar in you, the manipulator, the scared child who learned early that honesty doesn't always protect you, that sometimes lying feels like safety. The liar game doesn't create evil, it excavates it. It pushes players into the corners of their psyche and forces them to make decisions from fear rather than values. And when fear is your compass, morality becomes optional. But this goes deeper than just survival instinct. It's existential. Friedrich Nietzsche warned that morality itself is a construction, one used by the weak to protect themselves from the strong. That people obey not because they are good, but because they are conditioned to remove the conditioning. And what's left? Desire, power, will. The liar game strips players of their social masks and leaves them face to face with their rawest drives. When rules dissolve, when the only thing standing between you and ruin is your ability to deceive or detect deception, what survives isn't your kindness. It's your cunning. Jean-Paul Sartre would argue that in a system like this, you aren't discovering who you are, you're creating who you are with every choice. There is no fixed identity, no inner core of unshakable virtue. You are what you choose under pressure. You are your actions. And if that's true, then who you become in the game is just as real as who you thought you were outside it. So now you're in a paradox. Lying to win feels wrong, but losing to preserve your morals feels like self-sabotage. You start wondering if your values are even yours, or if they were programmed into you by a society that never practices what it preaches. Because let's be honest, society punishes lies publicly, but privately, it rewards them. People fake confidence to get jobs, fake affection to get intimacy, fake agreement to avoid conflict. We don't live in a truth-based world, we live in a performance-based one, and in performance, sincerity is a liability. Arthur Schopenhauer believed that people are fundamentally driven not by reason but by will, a blind, restless force to survive, achieve, dominate. He saw humans as tragic figures pretending to be rational while actually being puppets of unconscious desire. So what happens when a game like this exposes that truth? You begin to realize that people are not who they claim to be, that sometimes you are not who you claim to be, and that your sense of self might be more fragile than you thought. This is where philosophical despair creeps in. The moment when you realize that doing the right thing might not lead to reward, that honesty might isolate you, that your moral compass only works when others aren't messing with the magnet. So you start asking, is it possible to live with integrity in a world built on deception, or is morality just a luxury of the naive? Even Aldous Huxley, in his warnings about society's hidden manipulation, showed how people could be conditioned to want their own oppression, to mistake safety for freedom, to mistake obedience for virtue. The liar game makes you question all of that, because here's the secret it reveals. People don't lie to gain power, they lie to avoid powerlessness. And when the game begins, and you're thrown into that room and your debt is looming like a shadow, you don't lie because you enjoy it. You lie because you have to. And maybe that's the most haunting realization of all. The line between good and evil isn't drawn between you and the other players. It's drawn within you. Between the part that wants to win without harming anyone, and the part that's willing to do anything to not be left behind. You think you're entering a game, but you're really entering a mirror. And what stares back isn't the face you show the world, it's the face you hope no one ever sees. Because it's easier to believe that you're a good person who was tricked into doing bad things than to admit that deep down, when pushed hard enough, you always had the capacity to choose them. Now you're left with a heavy question. If morality bends under pressure, was it ever real to begin with? We've only begun to uncover the problem. But what happens next, what this game does to your mind, to your sense of self, to your ability to trust, is even more terrifying. Because there's a cost to deception that no one talks about. Not just what it does to others, but what it does to you. Let's look at that next. At first, it's just a small lie, a strategic misdirection, a white lie to buy time, a harmless bluff to avoid being the naive one again. But then it works. They fall for it. You gain an edge. The room feels a little less hostile. You exhale. And just like that, the seed is planted. Not in the other players. In you, because now you know deception works. And worse, it feels good. That's where the real damage begins. Not in the results, but in the internal shift. You tell yourself it's just for the game, just for this one round. But the human brain doesn't compartmentalize so cleanly. Once you teach yourself that lying is a valid tool, that manipulation is sometimes necessary, something rewires deep inside your mind. The liar game isn't just testing you, it's training you. And here's the trap: you don't even notice it happening. This is the insidious brilliance of psychological conditioning, as B.F. Skinner showed in his work on operant behavior. We don't need external punishment or reward forever. Once a behavior becomes internalized, once we start to believe it's part of who we are, we repeat it by default. So now you're not just lying in the game, you're adapting to it. You start anticipating betrayal before it happens. You doubt sincerity even when it's real. You analyze every smile, every pause, every sentence that feels too rehearsed. And soon, you're not even playing to win anymore. You're playing to not be fooled. That paranoia. It follows you, beyond the game, into your friendships, your work, your sense of self. Because here's the cruel irony. The more you rely on deception, the less you trust anyone else. You become trapped in a loop of distrust, where every act of manipulation you commit becomes proof that others are capable of the same. You assume everyone else is playing the same game, whether they are or not. That's the consequence no one warns you about. Lying doesn't just corrode relationships, it corrodes your worldview. Neuroscientifically, the more often you lie, the less your amygdala, the brain's fear and guilt center, reacts. Research has shown that with each repeated deception, the emotional response dulls. What once made your stomach turn now feels casual, and that dullness isn't just emotional, it becomes existential. Because if everyone is lying and no one can be trusted, what's the point of trying to be good? You begin to question everything. Is kindness real, or is it just a tactic? Is love real, or is it just mutual manipulation that happens to feel good? Are you real, or just a mask you've learned to wear so others won't see the cracks? This isn't just paranoia, this is identity erosion. When you bend your values enough times, they don't bounce back. They snap, quietly, permanently. And you're left with something far worse than guilt: apathy. You stop caring about who's lying and who's honest. You stop caring about your image or your integrity. You just want to get through the round. Then the next one. Then the next. This is what Viktor Frankl described as the existential vacuum, that gnawing sense of meaninglessness that sets in when our actions no longer reflect any core belief or purpose. When we become untethered from values, we drift, and drifting is dangerous. Because in that void, any system that gives you a sense of control, even if it's built on lies, feels better than nothing. So you cling to the game. You rationalize your moves. You tell yourself, everyone else would do the same, and maybe they would. But that doesn't change what it's doing to you. You used to be someone who believed in people. Now, you analyze them like threats. You used to believe in second chances. Now you look for leverage. And here's the bitter truth. The game doesn't end when the final round is over. It keeps playing in your head, long after the cameras turn off, long after the debt is cleared, because it's not just money you've lost the luxury of simple belief. You'll never be able to walk into a room again without wondering who's playing a game you can't see. You'll never hear a compliment without dissecting its possible motive. You'll never fully believe and trust again, because you've seen too much. And yet, the most dangerous part, you don't hate it. In some twisted way, it makes you feel powerful, smart, awake. You feel like you've been let in on the world's biggest secret, that everyone is wearing a mask, and now you finally have one of your own. But that power comes at a price. Because behind the mask, you're more alone than you've ever been. Even if someone genuinely cares for you now, you won't feel it. Even if someone tells you the truth, you won't believe it. Even if someone reaches out, you'll hesitate. Not because you don't want to connect, but because your instincts no longer know how to trust. You're no longer a person navigating a game. You're a game that used to be a person, and maybe that's the final consequence. Not that you lose the people around you, but that you lose access to your own capacity for connection. You survive, but you don't feel alive. You win, but you're hollow. You're safe, but you're cold. And now you have to ask, is survival worth it? If it costs you your ability to believe in others, is winning worth it? If it means becoming someone you never wanted to be? This isn't about debt anymore, or games. It's about identity, sanity, humanity. So what's the way out? Is there one? Or once you've adapted to the game, are you destined to keep playing it forever? Let's talk about rebellion, not against others, but against the person you've become. There's a moment in every liar game round when the tide turns, not when someone wins, but when someone refuses to play by the rules everyone else has silently agreed to. When a player stands up, not in defiance of the game, but in defiance of what the game tries to turn them into. And here's what makes that moment powerful. It doesn't begin with a bold speech or some clever twist. It begins with a choice to stop playing for yourself alone. The real rebellion isn't breaking the system. It's refusing to become the kind of person the system rewards. Imagine this. You're deep into the final round. Everyone's lying, bluffing, colluding. Alliances form and dissolve like smoke. And then you do the unthinkable. You tell the truth. Not because it's strategic, not because it guarantees a win, but because you realize something. If you keep playing the game their way, you'll lose something you can't get back. And suddenly, the power dynamic shifts. See, the game only works if everyone agrees to its logic. But when one person chooses differently, it exposes the fragility of the entire system. Because truth, when delivered without fear, disorients liars. They expect deception. They're trained for it. But sincerity, that short-circuits the playbook. Here's the paradox. In a world of liars, the person who tells the truth becomes the most unpredictable player in the room. It's the same in life. People expect you to protect your image, to say what's safe, to follow the script. But when you stop pretending, when you speak from your raw, untamed truth, it's unsettling, disarming, revolutionary. You're no longer playing defense, you're redefining the board. But let's be clear, this doesn't mean being naive. The rebellion isn't blind trust. It's informed courage. It's knowing exactly how dark people can be, and choosing to act from integrity anyway. It's learning the rules inside out, so you can break them, not just escape them. It's what philosopher Viktor Frankl described as the last human freedom, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way, even in psychological torture. Even in systems designed to strip you down to your most self-serving instincts, you still have agency. So what does rebellion look like in the liar game? It looks like giving up the chance to win more, so someone else doesn't have to lose everything. It looks like exposing your own plan to a rival, just to see if they'll respond with the same decency. It looks like choosing humiliation over betrayal, because one can be recovered from, and the other can't. But that takes more strength than deception ever will, because lying is easy when you're afraid. Telling the truth, with your eyes open, that's war. And the battlefield is your own conditioning. You were trained to think vulnerability equals weakness. You were taught to equate caution with wisdom. But what if that's not true? What if courage looks like being the first one to stop pretending? Think of every story you've ever loved, every hero, every turning point, every redemption arc. The moment that changed everything was never a trick, it was a sacrifice. That's the blueprint. Even in liar game, the most powerful moments weren't when someone outsmarted everyone. They were when someone risked their own safety to preserve someone else's dignity. When someone trusted first, even when they had every reason not to. Those moments didn't just change outcomes, they changed people. Because rebellion, when done right, is contagious. Once one person decides they won't be ruled by fear or scarcity anymore, others start to remember that they too can choose differently. And that's how the game begins to collapse, not through force, but through conscience. But how do you build that kind of courage in yourself? You start small. You pause before your next white lie. You admit one hard truth to someone you care about. You apologize without defensiveness. You tell someone what you actually want, even if it makes you feel exposed. You forgive someone who hasn't apologized. Not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. These are quiet rebellions. But they ripple. They don't feel cinematic. They feel raw, uncomfortable, lonely, sometimes. But that discomfort, that's how you know you're no longer playing by fear's rules. And soon something shifts. The more you act from clarity, the less you need control. The more you align your actions with your values, the less fragile you feel. The more you practice truth, even clumsily, the less power deception has over you. Because the truth doesn't just protect you, it reclaims you. And when you reclaim yourself, no one else gets to define who you are. Not the system, not the liars, not the part of you that adapted out of survival. You become someone who can walk into any game, any room, any conflict, and still recognize yourself when it's over. That's the real win, because in a world designed to strip you of your essence, to grind your principles into dust, the most radical thing you can do is remain human, and humanity isn't some soft, passive thing. It's fierce, it's inconvenient, it's deeply, dangerously alive. So when you find yourself in the next round, whether it's a literal game or just another conversation where the stakes are invisible but heavy, remember this: you don't have to play like them, you can play like you. And when you do, you don't just change your own story, you give others permission to do the same. Now ask yourself, what happens when enough people stop lying, not out of ignorance but out of strength? What kind of world could we build if truth wasn't seen as weakness, but as power? That's the world waiting on the other side of the game. But first, we have to face one final truth. The most difficult one of all. The truth we've been avoiding since the beginning. Let's go there. What if the real enemy was never the lie? What if the real enemy was the need for the lie? That gnawing hunger to control perception, to be safe, to be seen as something more polished, more composed, more strategic than the trembling, truth-carrying animal underneath. Because here's what the liar game uncovers at its deepest layer. The lie isn't just a strategy, it's a shield. And behind that shield, not malice, not evil, but a wound. A fear of not being enough. A fear that if you played honestly, no one would choose you. That your transparency would cost you respect, or connection, or love. That if people saw the real you, the one without calculation, they would walk away. And so we lie. Not to deceive others, but to protect the most fragile parts of ourselves from the sharpness of the world. The game was never about money. It was about worth, about identity, about what you're willing to become to feel like you matter. You might have thought you were playing to win 100 million yen, but what you were really chasing was validation, the prize, not being abandoned. That's the final trap, because you never needed to lie to survive. You needed to lie to feel worthy of survival. And that's what the game exploits. Not your greed, your loneliness. It takes your hope for connection and dangles it like bait. It tells you if you're smart enough, cold enough, quick enough, you'll finally be safe. But the real twist, no one wins this game alone. In the final episodes of Liar Game, the players who truly change the course of the game don't do it with strategy. They do it with something far more dangerous: vulnerability. They trust when it makes no sense. They tell the truth even when they know they'll be attacked. They choose empathy when betrayal would have been more profitable. And somehow, against all odds, it works. Not because it's efficient, but because it breaks the rules of the system from the inside. Because if even one person in the room refuses to treat others like enemies, the whole architecture of the game begins to shake. That's the ultimate truth. The system can't save you. But neither can rebellion. Only relationship can. And I don't mean relationship in the romantic sense. I mean recognition. The moment you look at the person across from you, not as a threat, not as a pawn, but as a mirror, someone just as scared, just as desperate, just as tired of pretending, someone who, like you, wants to be understood more than they want to be right. The liar game isn't won with the best move. It's won when one person reaches out without an angle, without agenda, and says, in essence, I see you, and I'm not here to hurt you. That's not weakness, that's revolution. Because when people see each other clearly, the lies lose their power. The paradox is this: the most powerful thing you can do in a world built on deception is to show up as someone who no longer needs to deceive. Not because you're naive, but because you've outgrown the need. You've seen the chaos, the cruelty, the collapse, and you've decided not to replicate it. You've stopped asking, how do I win? And started asking, what kind of person do I want to become in the process of playing? That's the liberation. Not a clean slate, not a clear conscience, but a chosen self. One forged through fire, one who has lied, manipulated, and nearly drowned in the rules of the game, and who now knows, with terrifying clarity, you are not your tactics. You are not your past. You are what you decide to become, now. You don't have to keep playing by inherited rules. You don't have to be defined by the masks you once wore. You don't have to let fear choose for you anymore. You can choose integrity. Not as a virtue, but as a weapon. A silent, radiant weapon that cuts through the noise and says, I will not become what tried to break me. And in doing that, something remarkable happens. People start to trust again. Because someone has to go first. Someone has to break the spell. And maybe that someone is you. Maybe the next time you're sitting at a table, metaphorical or not, you won't think, how do I outplay them? You'll think, how do I disarm them with my truth? And maybe that's how the next game ends. Not with a winner, but with people who didn't lose themselves trying to become one. So now, take a breath and ask yourself, not as a strategy, not as a tactic, but as a reckoning, if I were to stop lying to the world today, what would I have to face in myself? And deeper still, who might I become if I no longer needed to hide? The game is over. The cameras are off. The room is quiet now. You're left with nothing but the truth. Not the one they gave you. Not the one you rehearsed. The one that's been waiting beneath the noise all along. Now walk forward with it.